Red hives are probably one of the most well-rounded hives in Beeswarm Simulator, and today I'm going to be going over the bees, Beequips, mutations, amulets, and everything you need to know about what makes the best red hive. The date of this recording is November 2024, so just make sure there aren't any updated guides on my channel. If there are, there will most likely be the word outdated in my title, so just make sure that this isn't outdated. Also, any mistakes or corrections I need to make will be in the pinned comment below or the description, so just be sure to check those before watching the entire video. A couple of important notes before we start. I would recommend going blue before red, especially if you can macro. This is so you can get enough honey for double pass at Scorch Saw, all 50 hive slots, or 45 because 50 hive slots is pretty expensive, and enough honey for all the mythics you'll need for red. If you do have macro, you can also macro for strawberries and get your gifted red mythics, which is very important. You don't need a macro for blue to make solid honey, and you don't even need the Tide Popper to make good honey. You can still use the Petal Wand and make just as good honey. Maybe not just as good, but it would still be really good. If you can't macro, I would still recommend going blue. However, maybe don't commit as much to blue if you can't macro, because you don't really want to get stuck with only Scorch and not enough honey for the mythics, which wouldn't really give you much honey as red. As I mentioned before, red mythics are very important because they have all the abilities that make red their honey. If you don't have the gifted mythic reds, you're not going to make that much money. That's why it's so important to prep for that before you switch to red. Alright, now let's go over the base hive layout and ratio of precise to spicy bees. To start, we should go over how the red hive actually works. The main component of a red hive is the precise and spicy bees. The precise bees help with getting the red boost tokens that activate your passive Scorching Star, and the spicy bees help by putting flames on the field, which will cause the Scorching Star to grow bigger and give more pollen. The base mythic hive layout you will have will be 11 precise bees, 10 spicy bees, 8 vectors, 4 tadpoles, and 1 buoyant. The rest of the bees are 3 carpenter bees, 1 shy bee, 1 Riley bee, 1 commander bee, 1 rad bee, 1 brave bee, 1 hasty bee, and of course 1 basic bee. The event beads are pretty standard: bear, crimson, digital, festive, and tabby. This is the base hive you're going to have, and some of the bees you can swap out for others, but sticking with the ratios given is highly recommended. Something you could do is swap out a vector bee for a vicious bee. This would help with macroing for resources because of the minus monster respawn time, and it could help with Robo-Bear challenge, but this will reduce the amount of honey you make due to the minus vector. So only do this if you macro often and really want vicious for Robo-Bear challenge. Another swap you can make is a vector for a gifted fuzzy if you don't have a fuzzy alt. This would definitely boost the amount of honey you make because of the pollen haze ability fuzzy bee gives off. Just keep in mind though that pollen haze is only given off by a gifted fuzzy bee, so make sure that your fuzzy bee is gifted if you're going to make the swap. Now you obviously want to have everything gifted, but it's really important to try to prioritize your precise and spicy bees first because they'll earn you the most honey at the start. You also want to make sure that all of the rare and epic bees listed are gifted. 1, because they're really easy to get with star jelly or even normal royal jelly and give off good hive bonuses. And 2, it's very important that you have all of the rares and epics because the Beequips heavily rely on this. Speaking of that, let's move on to Beequips. Beequips are very important in any hive color, and some Beequips are needed for this hive composition to work, so I'll go over those first. Before that, I do want to mention that I have a video diving into how Beequip stats are determined, which would help put into perspective how rare some stats are and how you can get them. I also showcase a sheet where you can calculate the chance of an upgrade on any Beequip you have, so if you're interested in that, it will be linked in the description, or you can click the card at the top right of the screen. The Beequips needed for this red hive to work are 1 toy drum, right here, and it goes on Riley bee for speed tokens, 2 toy horns, which goes on brave bee and crimson bee, and those give, melody tokens. Then you need a whistle to go on commander bee, which is just for more speed tokens, and you need a kazoo on buoyant bee down here for the extra melody tokens. Without these Beequips, the hive will not work well and you'll lose out on a lot of honey. The good news is, the chance of that stat being on the Beequip is a 100% chance, so you don't really need to worry about waxing to get that stat, and it'll just come with that Beequip. For the rest of the Beequips on this list, they aren't needed, but will increase the amount of honey you make by a ton. I'll go down the list of possible Beequips you could have in your hive. For most players, obtaining the best possible Beequips are nearly impossible because some of the stats required are extremely rare. So just use the best ones you have and try to work towards getting better ones through trading. Not to mention, getting perfect stats on each Beequip is pretty much impossible because the chance is nearly 0% for most of the Beequips, and I go into more depth about this in my advanced Beequip stat guide. I'll highlight the better Beequips in this list, but for the most part, just use the best ones that you have. I've created a tier list for each of the Beequips on this list, and I'll go in depth on each of them and which stats are really helpful. On the toy horn and the toy drum, Bee ability pollen is very helpful and isn't extremely rare to roll. On the whistle, you can get super crit power and melody, which are very good. However, these stats are extremely rare and only come from caustic waxing. It's very difficult to get both of these stats on a single whistle, so just keep that in mind. On the kazoo, you can get super crit power and critical power, which again are very good. Super crit power, like the whistle, is very hard to get and only comes from caustic waxing. Crit power is a little bit more common than super crit power, and it doesn't need caustic waxing. Moving on to the other possible Beequips you could use, Pink Shades on the basic Bee is an easy S tier Beequip. It can get super crit power and super crit chance, which are incredibly strong for red. On top of all that, it can get the focus ability, which is really solid. Super crit chance and the focus ability can only come from caustic waxing, so just remember that. Another S tier Beequip is the poinsettia. You can have 2 poinsettias and can get extra red pollen on them. You can have as much as plus 10% red pollen per poinsettia, and you don't need caustic wax. You can also get bee gathered pollen, which is good, but red pollen should be the more important stat. These can go on shy bees or any of your tad bees. Another really good Beequip is the festive wreath on your festive bee, which is pretty obvious. This one can be pretty hard to get because it only comes around during Beesmas, and you can only get one per account every Beesmas. The best thing that comes from the festive wreath are the festive mark tokens, which give a bunch of buffs. I wouldn't recommend caustic waxing because of how rare it is. Peppermint antenna is another solid Beequip that you could put on your bear bee. This one is one of the few Beequips where the hive bonus isn't the focus, and it's actually the bee ability rate just for the bee. This is because bear bee morphs are one of the most OP tokens in the game, and getting those faster can lead to huge buffs. You can get double and even triple bear morphs if you have digital bee, which is really good. Speaking of digital, sweatband is another great one to have for the digital bee. The main focus is the white gathering amount for the bee itself and red pollen as a hive bonus if it's on there. The smiley sticker is another great Beequip and actually changes the bees in your hive. You're looking for the honey mark ability, which does need caustic wax. If you have a smiley with the honey mark ability, you want to put it on one of your vector bees, then swap out a carpenter bee for another vector. Another thing you can look for is mark duration, which isn't terrible and would be a good addition along with the honey mark. One Beequip you may not be expecting are the reindeer antlers. This Beequip would go on puppy bee, and you are looking for the baby love ability. This is an insanely good Beequip, however it is the rarest stat to get in the game. Not only that, but you need caustic wax, and it's on a Beequip that you can only get once per Beesmas. This is not a stat I would go hunting for, but if you manage to get your hands on a reindeer antler with baby love, swap out a tad for a puppy. Moving on to the non-S tier Beequips. The Paper Angel is a good Beequip and would go on your Photon Bee. You're mainly looking for bee ability pollen, but can also get ability token lifespan on this, which is another decent stat. The Paper Clip is also another solid Beequip, and is pretty much the same as the Paper Angel, just with lower chances to get the main stat you want, bee ability pollen. It does have better bee ability token lifespan chance compared to the Paper Angel, but bee ability pollen is the main stat you want. Put this on any bee that is available. Moving on to the Charm Bracelet. You're going to want to put this on Carpenter or Shy Bee, and the main thing you want is the Melody ability token. You do need caustic wax for this, and is pretty rare, but it's helpful because having more melody is always helpful. The Rose Headband is a borderline decent Beequip. This is because the only reason you would take this is for extra rose pollen and red capacity. You'd only want this if you're using Vicious, but could be helpful as it boosts Vicious attack by a good amount. There's a low chance of getting bee attack, but it does need caustic and overall isn't really worth risking unless you have the resources for it. The last Beequip on this list is the Beesmas Top. You're going to want to put this on any available bee and is a decent Beequip for earlier red hives. The only stat you want is the crit power, and there's always at least a 2% crit power on every single bee top. You can wax it up to 10%, but the chance isn't very high. Now remember, none of these Beequips are quote-unquote bad, but some are better than others. This is just a list of possible Beequips that are very helpful for red, and you don't need every single one on this list for good honey. Getting these yourself requires a lot of waxing and luck. You can also trade for them, but they're not going to be cheap. If you want to dive into percentages of getting certain stats, you can go into the advanced Beequip guide linked in the description. Now, let's move on to mutations. Mutations are more of an endgame thing because you need a lot of bitterberries to get the perfect mutations, so if you're just starting, I wouldn't worry too much about them. The main mutations for red are on the precise, spicy, and vector bees, with the best mutation being move speed. Ability rate isn't a bad option either, especially for vectors, but move speed is still better. This allows the bees to move quicker over the field, which will reduce the time it takes for them to get from flower to flower. Another mutation that isn't bad is instant conversion on your precise bees, but once again, move speed is the better mutation. On digital bee, it is very important that you have gather percentage. This is because the smileys that they put on the field will give major pollen with the right drives and Beequip. If the gather mutation is over 25%, the smiley pollen that the smiley token gives will be really good. I've seen people get trillions of honey with a single smiley token, so you can make crazy honey with the right amount of drives, mutation, and Beequip. For every other bee in the hive, you're going to want either bee ability rate or move speed like the mythics. But for some of the bees, I would recommend ability rate. The most important bee to have ability rate on is bear bee, because when matched with digital, it can get you double and even sometimes triple bear moths, which is a huge boost. The reason most bees would be best with bar is because the amount of tokens they would give with and without the Beequips. It is important to get those ability tokens as much as possible. Move speed is good, but I would go with bar on most of the other bees. Move speed and bee ability rate are the more rare mutations, so starting with attack percentage at early stages is fine. However, this won't really help you with making honey and just boost your attack a bit. If you have attack on the precise bee, it actually can help you get extra honey because precise bees collect pollen with target practice based on their attack, so that would help out a bit. Alright, that's all the mutations, now let's move on to amulets. Amulets play a huge part in making honey, probably the second most important thing. I'll go over each amulet and what stat they get on which amulet. Starting with the most important amulet, the Supreme Star Amulet, or SSA. You're going to want pollen, red pollen, instant conversion, bee ability rate, or bee gather pollen, both is fine, but bee ability rate is recommended, and critical chance. For the passives, you're going to want Scorching Star and Star Saw. If you can't afford the double passive, I'd recommend not switching to red yet if you haven't already, as getting stuck with only Scorching sucks if you can't convert fast enough. You can try just Scorching if you're starting with red, but keep in mind you may not make very much honey because converting will be difficult without Star Saw. The next is the Ant Amulet. You're going to want Convert Rate, which is guaranteed, Crit Chance, Crit Power, Bee Attack, Red Pollen, and White Pollen. On the King Beetle Amulet, you're going to want Bee Attack, Mushroom, and Strawberry Pollen. On the Moon Amulet, you're going to want Bond from Treats, because you'll probably be leveling up your hive, and Honey per Pollen. Next is the Shell Amulet. You're going to want Goo, Pollen, and Goo Conversion. None of the fields you can get are red fields, so don't worry too much about the field buffs. On your Stickbug Amulet, you're going to want Red Bee Attack, Red Pollen, or Pollen, Bee Attack, and Bee Attack Power. Last but not least, we have the Cog Amulet. Most of you probably won't have the Supreme, but all these buffs should apply to Diamond and above. You're going to want Bee Attack, Red Pollen, Mark Ability Pollen. Bee Gather Pollen and Event Bee Ability Pollen also work instead of Mark Ability Pollen, but I would recommend Mark Ability Pollen because it just seems like the best. Super Crit Power, and Instant Red Conversion. That pretty much covers the last of the amulets, and one more note before we get on to boosting. I would highly prioritize the Supreme Star Amulet before any other amulet. The Supreme Star Amulet and getting those double passes will give you the most honey, so don't worry if your other amulets aren't perfect yet. I'm going to briefly go over boosting and explain some of the main pointers you'll need to know. Boosting does take practice, and as you get more and more bees, it can get difficult. With enough practice, you should get pretty good at boosting, so don't worry too much about that. First off, if you have a Fuzzy Alt and a Digital Bee, it doesn't really matter what field you boost in because Fuzzy Alts max the flowers out. Keep in mind that Rose can fit up to 15 duplicated tokens, and Straw and Pepper can only do 12. You might want to try avoid Mushroom, because the actual mushrooms in the field can make it difficult to boost. The Strawberry is smaller, so it would be easier to get around, and the field would fill up with marks faster. However, that's only if you have a digital and a fuzzy alt. If you don't, then I would just boost in the pepper. You're going to want to have the correct winds from the wind shrine and a 4 times field boost in the field that you are boosting in. If you don't get the correct winds, like you didn't get the pepper winds, but you got other red fields, it won't completely ruin the boost to boost in those other red fields, and you'll still earn a good amount of honey, just maybe not as much as the pepper. To have the highest chance to get pepper patch wins, I would donate a purple potion to the wind shrine. But if you do want to test your luck, try donating a gold egg, and you could get more powerful wins. The strategy to keeping your 4 times pepper boost for the whole 30 minutes of wins is right before you start your boost, you're going to want to use a glitter. Then wait a minute or two, then use your loaded dice in the field. This will give you a 4 times boost, but before it runs out, you'll be able to use another glitter which will refresh the 4 times boost for an extra 15 minutes. During your boost, you're going to want to try to keep your 10 times precision up from your precise bees. You also need to balance this with constantly getting precise marks from hitting the last target in your ability, which should glow purple. You should also always have 10 times focus and haste. When your Scorching Star is active, you need to make sure to stay by as many flames as possible. This is how you get the biggest Scorching Star and a ton of honey. Right before your X Flame ability pops, you should try moving to the middle of the field so that your flames stay on the field. You should always be using your stingers to activate your Star Saw if you have a lot. If you're low on stingers, save them for only when your Scorching Star is activated. The more marks from Carpenters, Precise, and Vectors there are on the field, the better. You should always be trying to stay within the mark ranges as much as possible. If you do all these things simultaneously, you will get the best results. Remember to also use your other buffs like Super Smoothies, get your Sticker Sack, get your Nectars, and all the little tiny boosts like Balloon Blessing, Marshmallow Bee if you have them, which again you should use sparingly, and Puffshroom Blessing. Well, that about covers it for this Red Hive guide. If I missed anything or left anything out, please let me know in the comments. I also want to thank MetaBee, as this is where I got a lot of the info on this guide. A link to that site will be in the description. My Beequips stat guide video will also be linked in the description if you want to go check that out. Thank you everyone for watching, and have a great day.